Well, thank you so much for watching Morning Live. Now, National Treasury has decided to allow the alcohol industry to pay excise tax on liquor after a 90-day delay. And this follows an industry request to the South African Revenue Service, SARS, for a deferment of 5.1 billion rand until the ban on the sale of alcohol is lifted. Now, the deferral will be effected through the Customs and Excise Act rule that will be published by SARS. And joining us now is Bernard Sachs, a tax economist from Mazars, to tell us how this deferment actually impacts South Africa's economy, as well as the annual tax revenue turnover for SARS. Bernard, thanks so much for your time. As always, welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and thank you very, very much for having me on the show, and welcome and good morning to your viewers as well.
Bernard, so the industry requested that this deferment hold until the ban is actually lifted. Instead, they were given 90 days. So what does this mean in terms of what they are going through at the moment?
Well, Sakina, what happens at the moment is that the product is being manufactured and is shipped to their warehouses ready for distribution. But that in itself triggers the obligation to pay the excise duty over to SARS. And clearly the businesses, even big businesses, can't afford such big dents in their cash flow to pay the excise duty without any funds coming in from sale of the product. And it's for this reason there was a recognition by National Treasury of the difficulties faced by those businesses, and therefore allowing them the 90-day leeway. And I can't speak for National Treasury, but I expect that they would anticipate that by the time the 90-day period has expired, the ban on the sale of alcohol would start being lifted, which would allow sales to take place and cash flow to be received by the manufacturers, allowing them to pay those excise duties.
So what exactly does this deferral mean for the economy of South Africa and, of course, to us as taxpayers? Does this have any impact on us?
Yes, of course it has an impact on us. And the reason it has an impact on us is that it's 5 billion rand that should be coming into the coffers of the South African Revenue Service on a current basis, 2.5 billion. I think it was 2.5 billion in July and 2.5 billion in August, and that will now be delayed. And so there will be a National Treasury will have to wait for those funds to be able to deploy them. And so yes, there is an effect. There certainly is an effect on the economy because there is a delay in receipt of those funds.
So, Bernard, this is not a tax break, simply a delay, as I understand it. So how exactly will that help the industry, given that alcohol sales are still banned?
Well, it will help the industry in that they will effectively only have to pay it when the funds from sales start coming in, assuming, of course, that the funds from sales coincide with the extension period. So that's how it helps them. But of course, they'll then be on a sort of a backlog. They'll have a backlog, and they'll have to pay their current amounts due as well as this backlog amount. So they will have further difficulties when the alcohol ban is lifted, and they're able to start making those sales.
Now, SARS has said on more than one occasion, Bernard, that they have lost billions of rands in revenue as well due to this ban on the sale of alcohol. How does this deferment then affect that existing problem? And also, how sustainable is a tax deferment such as this one?
Well, I calculate that they are probably losing on the excise duties somewhere of the order of 2.5 billion rand per month, purely in relation to alcohol. while the ban is in effect. And the question is, well, is it sustainable? Well, not based on the projections that were laid out by the Minister of Finance. So if there's going to be a longer term ban, then funds will have to be found in another area in order to fund expenditure, or alternatively, expenditure will have to be cut in certain areas and reallocated to other areas. And this is something that's probably keeping the minister up at night, because he has very limited funds at his disposal, and he's got to deploy them in the most efficient way possible, bearing in mind that at the present, health is uppermost in his thoughts, as well as social expenditure, as well as education expenditure, and not far behind is public security. So there's a lot for the minister to think about, and it would create serious problems for him in my view, if the alcohol ban were to continue for very much longer.
So you talk about this keeping the minister up, and to that point, what sort of options does he have at his disposal, given the state of the economy, given the shrinking tax base as a result of this lockdown and the effect that it's had? What are some of the options that he can possibly look at?
Well, he's already triggered some of the options in the sense that he's already borrowed from abroad. Other options may be to raise taxes, but I don't think that is an option that would be considered for very long, because clearly the South African economy is not in a state to pay additional taxes, to pay higher taxes, and so my thinking is that in order to increase the tax take, he's going to have to grow the tax base. And the only way, in my view, to grow the tax base is to stimulate growth in the economy. And that in itself isn't an overnight process, but it's a process that has to be commenced with immediately, and it's a process that has to be nurtured and followed through on an ongoing basis. And by doing that, they would be able to increase the number of taxpayers and increase the number of the amount of taxable income that those taxpayers are earning. That in itself would create more spending in the economy and further increase. It would stimulate activity and would further increase the tax take in other areas. So, in my view, growth is absolutely pivotal and key, and it is this. I encourage the minister to follow this path. I don't think that raising taxes or creating additional different taxes is the answer. Growth and stimulation of the economy is what's required now to pull us out of the deep economic hole that we find ourselves in.
And given what's happened here with the ban on the sale of alcohol, obviously you would imagine the tobacco industry would be looking at similar calls for tax deferments. But how much can the economy as it is right now, SARS and government by extension, actually absorb in terms of deferments that may be requested from government?
Well, I think talking about the tobacco side of things, their deferral period has been extended from 90 days to 150 days. It was initially set at 90 days at the beginning of the lockdown and was extended, but they haven't had that period in between in which they were allowed to manufacture product, and so their deferral is an overhang from the manufacturing that took place prior to lockdown. The question is, how much longer can the manufacturers themselves survive without manufacturing product and selling, and more importantly, selling the product. And so it's for this reason that National Treasury recognized these problems and granted the deferrals to the manufacturers of alcohol and tobacco, to give them the breathing space and the leeway to allow them to wait until funds had been received from the sale of product before they have to pay those excise duties over.
And of course, the big question is about saving jobs. And if you look at both these industries, the alcohol industry, as you say, the 90-day deferral there, and then 150 days for the tobacco industry, does this tax deferment actually help to save jobs in those industries in any way, Bernard?
Well, Sakina, I think that anything that gives the industry players the leeway and the manufacturers the leeway to defer the payment of a liability must assist in saving those jobs, because let's face it, it's now more than 4 months for the tobacco industry that they haven't been manufacturing, and for how much longer can they carry on? Even big businesses have a limitation, and they may start, if it hasn't taken place already, they may start laying off staff, and that can only add to the woes of the economy and the public as a whole. So it's all in all, it's not a good space, and I think it's for that reason that National Treasury recognized these difficulties.
And just finally, Bernard, the knock-on effect that this is obviously going to have, how are we likely to experience this as ordinary South Africans?
Well, I don't think that you're going to see any knock-on effect coming through immediately, other than the possibility that the minister may say that he has to borrow some further funds, perhaps on the local market. But I don't think that there's likely to be a short-term fall off in service delivery arising from these deferrals.
Well, Bernard Sachs, thanks so much for your time this morning. A tax expert talking to us about National Treasury's decision to grant a 90-day excise tax deferral for the liquor industry. We're going to take a break.